Okay, so welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started. We had a special guest lined up for today. It was Senator Wayne Langerholt, and we're hopeful he's able to join us sometime soon. Wayne is, as you know, the Senate Transportation Committee Chair. And on a topic like hearing legislative insiders talk about the General Assembly, transportation funding would likely come up and likely be discussed. So we thought who better to kick it off than the Senate Transportation Committee Chair. And Matt Jameson was kind enough to come up with that idea. So good idea, Matt. And hopefully your friend Wayne is able to join us here soon.
Thanks, John. Like I said, I'll let you know if he's able to join us. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. But yeah, welcome. Again, this is a KCA event. I am John O'Brien. I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. Today is being recorded, and most of our events are held late afternoon, early evening. You know, construction workers are essential. Repeat after me, construction workers are essential. So typically our events are held after the working hour. But due to our panel, knowing that this was better for their schedules, we went ahead and lined it up for the 10 o'clock hour. And since we do have an all-star panel here, I wanted to work around their schedules. So, you know, we're going to get started here. And if our guest, Senator Langerholt, is able to jump on, we'll maybe shoot away to him or cut away to him. Otherwise, we'll get started here. Let's meet the panel for starters here. We have, like I said, 4, highly respected Harrisburg insiders. And I'll just go across the screen at the top, calling them and allowing them to maybe provide some opening comments, talk about maybe who they are, their background real quick. I'm sure everyone knows them anyways, but just in case. So on my left, I see Stephen Caruso. Stephen and I actually both wrote for the Pitt News, Pitt alums, so that's good. Welcome, Stephen. Yeah, hail to Pitt.
Thanks for having me, John. Yeah, so I'm Stephen. I'm with the Pennsylvania Capital-Star. I cover the General Assembly and just general Pennsylvania government politics, kind of focused on the House, but I dabble in the Senate. And I don't know if I have any opening remarks, just we'll see what 2 years of this looks like, whatever, if January 2021 is anything to say, then I'm kind of terrified for February of this year.
Great. Welcome, Stephen. Looking forward to hearing your comments today. Next to him, I see John Wanner. John previously, probably 15 years ago, used to run a group that I run, GCAP, General Contractors Association of Pennsylvania. And John set the bar pretty high for me and others associated with GCAP. He was involved with the creation of CASPA, the Contractor and Subcontractor Prompt Payment Act, which is huge in our world to make sure our contractors get paid. So thanks to John, I got a lot of work to do to fill these big shoes here. So welcome, John. Take it away.
Thank you, John. I am president of Wanner Associates. It's a government relations and association management firm. I personally have been a registered lobbyist in Pennsylvania for more than 35 years. During that time, I've had somewhat of a specialty with design and construction groups, represent over the years, general contractors, subcontractors, specialty contractors, building trades, as well as the design side with engineers, landscape architects, surveyors, planners. Been involved in a lot of issues specific to the industry during that time, and very pleased to be invited to the panel, very distinguished panel. So thank you very much, John.
Great, good stuff. Thanks, John. Let's see, next to John, I see Jan Murphy from PennLive. Jan and I are both fellow Wildcats. Go Mechanicsburg. All right, so that's awesome to have. She's awesome if she's from Mechanicsburg. So
that's right. That's right. Very proud alum.
Yes.
I've been. I consider myself a local girl, but I've been covering the Capitol. And when Steve said 2 years, I'm thinking, oh gosh, I'm going to really date myself. It's more like 2 decades for me. But And I sort of wish I was invited to be part of this back in right after the pandemic hit and the economic shutdown, because I would have loved to have heard the stories and concerns from the contractors about the the governor's restrictions and all the shutdown orders that he put in place. But I'm happy to be here today, and yeah, I think this will be an interesting year. I think we're in for a lot of repeat history this year from what we heard last year, and it will be interesting. Hopefully, we get some things done. I get very frustrated at Pennsylvania treading water all the time. It seems like we hardly ever get ahead. So hopefully, we'll see some change in the near term.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to have you on here.
Thank you.
One more panelist we're going to meet, and then jump to our guest speaker here, Alex Halper from Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. Alex is a great voice for small businesses, and as the construction industry knows, we have a lot of small businesses, and it's great to have you as a friend speaking on our behalf in Harrisburg, and you do a great job with coalition building, and glad to have you on. So take it away, Alex.
Thank you very much, John. And yeah, thanks for the invitation to join you this morning, and appreciate being with my fellow panelists here. Yeah, it has been great working with John and your organization over the years on a number of issues. So we appreciate that very much. I'm a lobbyist for the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, for the statewide Chamber of Commerce. So we have about 10,000 members throughout Pennsylvania, crossing all industry sectors, really in every region, every county of PA. I've been with the PA Chamber. It'll be 10 years this April, and have had a chance to work with many of you in the past. So really appreciate being able to join you this morning. Thanks, John.
You bet. Glad to have all four of you here, and also glad to have our guest speaker. I see he has arrived. As I mentioned earlier, you can't have a talk about the upcoming legislative session without talking about transportation funding. And we're excited that Matt Jamison helped us get Senator Wayne Langerholt, the Senate Transportation Committee Chair. Thanks, Matt. You have any comments you want to add or anything?
No, I just wanted to thank Wayne for making the time this morning to join us. I did think he would be a good addition, given the topic this morning, with Wayne being the chair of the Transportation Committee. So thanks for your efforts, Wayne, in being here this morning. And John, thanks for setting it up.
Thanks. Without further ado, Mr. Transportation Committee Chair Langerholt, take it away.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. I know it's a little bit under different terms than I was expecting it to be. I thought I'd be coming to you live from my Capitol office here in Harrisburg, but again, with this storm that's whatever, I guess, still coming down, not as bad as what they were calling for, but I'm coming to you from Johnstown because session was actually canceled for today. So, but it's a pleasure to be here with you to talk about the upcoming challenges, and challenges most definitely are challenges that we face. I'm sure every one of you have felt that as well in the industry. And going forward, we're going to have a lot of issues to address. Since being named the chair of the Senate Transportation Committee, which I'm honored to take on, and it's been a few weeks or so now, I've just been kind of trying to cut my teeth on a lot of the issues that are addressing our Commonwealth. I had the opportunity to serve. I'm in my second term here in the Senate. I was first elected in 2016. And early on in my first 2 years, the first legislative session, I actually was on the Transportation Committee. So I kind of have a decent idea of where they're coming and some of the issues they're doing. Now, since taking the helm here, there are major issues, most notably being funding, as I'm sure you're all aware, and how to address the disparities in the funding, as well as the motor license fund and the way that money is allocated. In addition to that, we are I'm certain going to be addressing issues involving electric vehicles. And I'll preface that story with, I have a bill still, even last legislative session, and it was close to the finish line dealing with electric vehicles. And going back, I guess about 2 or 3 years prior to that, the first bill that I had signed into law dealt with natural gas powered vehicles and increasing the weight limit for those vehicles. And what we were finding, and it's particularly in my district, the 35th district, there were individuals and trucking companies and things of that nature that wanted to take advantage of that natural gas vehicle, but inherently their vehicles weighed about 2,000 pounds more than their diesel counterparts. So we addressed legislation to put them on the same playing field, so to speak. And then we did the same thing with electric. And why do I, you may say, how does that impact transportation? How does that impact funding and things that you're dealing with? But as we brought that bill to the chamber or to the committee and then to the full Senate, there were questions concerning amendments that were added actually in the House to address funding and registration to help with the general transportation funding issue. And what I say that for is that these electric vehicles may not be, obviously they're not buying gas, so that the gas tax that was enacted before my time to go to the roads and the infrastructure, they were not getting that tax. And moving forward now, as we hear different automakers saying that they're going to phase out completely their gas powered vehicles by certain fixed date years, that's going to be part of the conversation going forward, is addressing how do we address that, I guess, change in terms, so to speak, to electric vehicles from gas vehicles. And also, we've got a lot of challenges that we're facing in a post COVID-19 world. We're seeing that obviously transportation was down during COVID-19, which then leads to reduced revenues, which then leads to the impact on your industry, on where is the money for different types of construction funding and things of that nature. And probably most notably, as we established a budget, we did it kind of in two pieces this year, or last year rather. The initial budget we passed the end of May, early June, to address some of those core services. And then we came back into session here in the fall to do the supplemental budget. About a week or two before we were set to enact that supplemental budget, we were hit with the headlines of PennDOT $600 million shortfall for construction projects. Construction projects going to be on hold. So we were able to work through that without initially doing a straight issue. But that is something that is at the forefront. That is something that we are going to tackle. That is something that we are going to look at going forward here to ensure that those types of projects are not impacted, thereby not affecting your industry. But really, as I've only been at this for a few weeks, but we
got a little freeze up there. Wayne, can you hear me? Wayne?
Apparently the snow has hit Johnstown.
Yes. Yeah.
You there?
There
Okay.
you go. Okay.
Okay. Sorry about that. I think that must be on my end.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll go back. When did I cut out there? Did you hear about the public-private partner?
No.
Okay. So last week we had a hearing. We were in session last week, and I had a hearing in front of the Senate Transportation Committee on the public-private partnership, which was recently kind of got some news here with respect to those bridge tollings, if you've been familiar with. But we wanted to address some of the issues relative to that proposed plan. And what it does is it allows PennDOT to enact a public-private partnership. And their proposal is to toll a certain number of bridges within the Commonwealth. And that's still an evolving process. That's something that we're still looking at. There's something that I have some concerns with, on the legislative side going forward with the ability that PennDOT had to enact that size and that scope of a project through that statute. So we had a hearing and heard from two different sides of the aisle, both PennDOT, the secretary, and a lot of the trucking industry as well, to hear their concerns. And there's going to be further public comment on that going forward here. But we're really at the precipice here of a lot of different things, the culmination of a lot of different moving pieces, the pandemic being, at the forefront, and then as well as the funding and really a hope is going forward to address these issues, address these revenue shortfalls, but do it in a way that makes sense, that's common sense, and does not impact any kind of major initiative or major type of tax increase on the residents of the Commonwealth. But it's a large committee. Look forward to doing the work, and I will put this out there as I've done to anyone that I've spoken to since we got this chairmanship. I want to hear from you. I want to hear from the industry. I offer my office. It is always open. It is always accessible to hear the concerns because, this isn't my background. I don't have a background in transportation. I'm an attorney. I was an assistant district attorney, but I want to hear the impact that it has. I want to hear the concerns, and I use that in every facet, and whether it be transportation, whether it be anything that I vote on or bring to the forefront of the Senate, is to hear from the stakeholders that are involved, because I'm not going to pretend to say that I know everything from the beginning that's going to help transportation and what have you, but I want to know how it impacts the day-to-day operations. You folks live it, you folks deal with it, that's your industry, and I want to be a partner, and I want to help to guide our Commonwealth forward here. So I thank you for the opportunity, and any questions or things I'd be happy to entertain.
Yeah. Just like you don't pretend to know everything transportation related, I too pretend not to know everything. We're more building contractors. And when it comes to transportation issues, I kind of lean on my friend in Pittsburgh, Rich Borkowski from CAWP. So hopefully you and Rich know each other. If not, I'd love to make that relationship happen. And I don't know if you have any initial comments, Rich, if you can hear me.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Thanks, John.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll definitely reach out on both those issues. We've been tracking the electrical vehicles and the P3s. So we look forward to working with you going forward. So thanks, John.
You bet. Nothing like putting you on the spot, huh, Rich?
Hey, I'm ready.
Any other questions?
John.
Yep. Brenda?
Hey, John. I would just like to ask the senator, I deal with underground infrastructure. Some of my contractors in the National Utility Contractors Association of Pennsylvania also build some of those bridges, and they were actively building some of the P3 bridges over the past several years. But one of the things that is still an issue is utility relocation cost. The utilities are not relocated in a timely manner at the point in time when we go into construction. And so I think we have a way to help with that on more than just federal highway funded projects, would be the use of subsurface utility engineering. And that could also be expanded, I believe, into the highway right-of-ways that PennDOT has. And it would reduce the cost of businesses in the area when we're installing water and sewer infrastructure in those right-of-ways. So I would love to talk to you about that sometime.
Sure, would love to. Yeah, please reach out to my office. We'll schedule a meeting for sure. Would love to.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time, and we'll definitely make sure you connect you with the right people and give you the right resources, and just think of us whenever you have issues, and we're here to help, and we're here for you.
I will definitely take you up on that. So
Okay.
I will definitely be reaching out as things develop, and as I appreciate this introduction, but I look forward to working with you in the coming session.
Awesome. Sounds good. Stay safe out there.
Thanks.
With the storm here. So. Okay. Well, thank you. Now let's hear from the panel. All right. How about that? Good stuff here. As people that work in this industry know, we have a comical, funny industry, and when I announced to our building contractors that the Senate Transportation Committee chair is going to kick it off with some comments, the first email I got back was, "Are we now building bridges out of drywall? Why is he talking to building contractors?" But you know, transportation is important. You guys, our members, build these great structures, and you can't get to them without transportation. So it's a needed part for the Commonwealth. And better roads, better bridges is going to attract more commerce, more businesses. So yeah, I'll just throw it out to the panel, see if you have any initial comments on anything Senator Langerholt said. So anyone?
John, I'll follow up with what the senator said. Certainly agree with his observations. Funding is got to be at the top of the list. He made reference to PennDOT's need for 600 million at the end of last year. This has been a long time coming. Honestly, the funding issue for transportation has been kicked down the road. And we're coming to a critical point even before the COVID shutdown hit. Electric vehicles, more cost, or more fuel efficient vehicles. Plus you've got the transfer from the Turnpike Commission to PennDOT that's going to go away. You got public transportation issues. So that's right up there. To bring it back to your contractors, building contractors, infrastructure in general tends to be underfunded. I think probably because it's just not as sexy as some other topics. But on the building side, maybe there'll be relief from a federal stimulus bill, or the state may be able to do something. But in the short term, the needs are there. I served on a school construction advisory committee a couple of years ago with a number of different legislators. PlanCon funding was a program that reimbursed school districts for their construction needs, whether it be new construction or maintenance. And PlanCon has not been funded with any new money for, I'm going to say, almost 10 years. And that's a problem. I did see in the governor's agenda for this current legislative session, some ideas about maybe using what they call RCAP, Redevelopment Assistance Program money, to fund needed school construction. That's a very different approach than PlanCon, where if you were eligible as a school district, you could jump through the hoops and get the money. RCAP is very political, and there's probably not as much of it to go around. But I think that's out there. School construction, they've made some inways with ESCO projects, energy efficiency projects are still strong. And I would also say that, going back to what the governor talks about in his newsletter just last week about this session, workforce development has been an area where there's been a lot of interest from the construction industry. So if there's more dollars in either of those facets, I think infrastructure would certainly benefit, but that's got to be at the top of the list for a lot of construction contractors, because that's their livelihood. It's what they use to employ their workers. So keeping our fingers crossed on that.
If I were to jump in, I mean, I think that one of the things that will be interesting this upcoming year is just going to be like, what is there going to be capacity to do? What is there going to be political will to do? I was talking to some of the people I know in the Capitol. I think that I don't know where there's going to be will to pass anything big, whether it's transportation funding. Wolf did have that proposal about, using getting more funding into PlanCom. It just seems that there's not a lot of ability to pass some bipartisan things, especially funding related right now. I kind of have compared it, and no one's told me I'm wrong on this. I compared it to like a college student who waits until the last minute to finish a term paper. That's kind of the General Assembly when it comes to deadlines on spending. Like, there are all these spending issues. Everyone's kind of aware of the problem, but it takes like a drop dead deadline of like, oh, if you don't get it done at X date, the state is literally going to run out of money, that for everyone to be like, all right, let's do something. So the 2022 deadline for transportation funding is looming, but there isn't that sort of deadline with, I think, like school funding, as far as I know. If I'm wrong, please tell me, but I don't know if there's like a drop dead date. And so I get that leads me to some skepticism. Jan would probably also be able to like chime in. At the same time though, the optimism I'd say is that like, sometimes these deals just come out of nowhere. I mean, we kind of didn't have too much inkling about the plan to spend the $912 million in stimulus money that passed out of the Senate last week, supposed to get on Wolf's desk by the end of this week. That just kind of came and just popped up, and now it could be to Wolf by the end of the week. So like, I wish I could offer something more specific, but kind of like stuff doesn't happen unless there's a really strong incentive. And even then, if something is going to happen, it kind of just comes poof. And all of a sudden, like, oh, there's something moving. Like you'll hear rumbles beforehand, but that's kind of the best I can think of right now. Otherwise, prepare for maybe more partisan warfare. Sorry to be kind of not optimistic, but that would be my honest read.
Yeah, Alex, I'd love to hear what you have to say about this.
Well, I think everybody's correct that as much as there's an interest in infrastructure funding, it's the funding part that always seems to be a challenge. Everyone has a proposal for how to spend the money. It's just how to generate the revenue that no one can seem to agree on, and that that is not unique to Pennsylvania. That's been the case in at the national level and probably every state. I think that's one of the reasons that Act 89 of 2013 was noteworthy is the ability of an agreement to come together. But there are no easy answers for where to find the money. The legislation that Steve referenced that came out of the state Senate, that was the product of significant negotiation, as far as I've heard, and compromise, and that was federal dollars. They didn't have to raise any revenue to do that, and it was still a very noteworthy and the fact that they were able to pass that legislation. Now they also used another fund transfer, in this case from the Workers' Compensation Security Fund, in order to go into a proposed grant program for small businesses in the hospitality industry. But again, you're not asking, it's not a clear tax increase. It's not cutting funding or program elsewhere. So I think as much as infrastructure is going to be part of the discussion, it's going to be a challenge how you spend it. And when you're talking about infrastructure, and I actually thought, the senator's little glitch was a chance to mention things like broadband expansion, that is more and more being talked about as part of the infrastructure discussion, and needs to be, and our experience over the last year or so has shown how critically important that is. Employers have realized how critical that is, for years now. But again, that comes with a cost, and where do you find those dollars?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'll just jump in now and just say, Alex and Steve are right. This whole funding part of the equation is the conundrum. And, I was thinking it has been 18 years since we raised the personal income tax. It has been 4 or 5 decades since we raised the sales tax. And that's, I'm hearing rumblings that, okay, let's just apply the sales tax to everything. There's, I think, a proposal out there. Let's, food and clothing, and, lower it to a more palatable level. But, if you're going to tax everything. But the other thing that the IFO pointed out, the Independent Fiscal Office pointed out last week or so, was just how our state is aging, and how more and more people are in the 65 and up category, and our working population is shrinking. So it's going to require some serious political will, and legislators being willing to sacrifice not getting reelected to be able to address our funding problems. Because like you talk about the transportation problem. I honestly don't know that our current PennDOT secretary has the ability, like Barry Shoke did, to go in and really work the legislators and show them, okay, this is what more funding will do for your district. And so I think that transportation thing that's a big deal. That it's gonna, the only reason the law got through in 2013, one of the key factors is that nickel and dime and people could kind of stomach that. I mean, a little bit more for a driver's license, a little bit more for a vehicle registration. It's all that stuff. And it'll be interesting to see how they work this out. I mean, I don't know that P3s are going to be the full answer, but yeah, I just, it's so interesting to watch how they try to come together on finding solutions. That's the part that I just like really enjoy watching.
Yeah.
Yeah, people love the idea. Sorry, Steve.
I was just like, correct me if I'm wrong, the Jan or Alex, like you mentioned, not losing re-election, not being reelected. They passed that deal, and Sam Smith gets primaried by Chris Dush, wins barely, and then retires. He's like, I'm not doing this anymore. It's not worth like all the hassle of trying to pass, like to govern. And then he retired. Then we had Chris Dush kind of take his seat, right? Like that's kind of the timeline that happened there.
I believe that's right.
No, I mean, it's a good point. I know that advocates for increasing the gas tax have kind of analyzed nationally, and their bottom line is, it is very rare for someone to lose their seat as a result of voting for a gas tax. I think you can find examples like that. I think, Senator Valakovich out in Western PA, his primary opponent who was successful certainly talked about that tax. But, so it can be politically difficult, but overall, I'm not sure it is the political suicide that it is often made out to be. But if we're counting on legislators not worrying about re-election in order to advance an agenda, it's like, don't hold your breath, folks.
That's for sure. Always comes back to funding here. That's for sure. So I heard John's comment about workforce development, and Jan mentioned the shrinking workforce. And I go back to, 2019, when there was a bipartisan effort to create this Better Jobs for PA, and the R's and D's got behind it. So kind of a two-part question here. I hear Governor Wolf talking about more workforce development, as John pointed out. So part one is, can we do that without touching the severance tax? Let's not get severance tax going. But, how do we fund that also? And then part two, what other big issues are out there that we could get some bipartisan and stop all this political fighting and bickering, or am I just a dreamer and that can't happen? So
Go ahead.
I feel like Spotlight PA, I believe, had a story where they mentioned, like maybe in the second half, a story about Senator Corman when he became Senate President Pro Tem, sworn in and gave a speech where he said, I think that this body needs to focus more on ethics, on political reform. Once again, putting aside any snark that anyone on any side of the aisle might want to make. Brian Cutler, the speaker, sponsored, I think, the most recent update to the state's lobbying law. So like, if I had to pick anything that's bipartisan, I mean, just a broader issue, maybe there's some hunger for like good government-y, lobbying reform, campaign finance reform, maybe, also the General Assembly just has the most expensive campaign. About $44 million were spent on elections for the General Assembly in 2020. So maybe there's some thoughts there, but that's the main bipartisan thing I can pull off the top of my head.
Yeah, I agree. I think government reform is the one place where there could be some kind of a bipartisan agreement. And I can't help but think all this talk about election reform, they've got to be able to come together on something on this. I mean, it's both the House and Senate are spending so much energy on dealing with this issue. And there has to be something that comes out of that, because last year's election, no one wants to see the fallout that we've dealt with ever again. So those would be government reform and election reform, I guess, are the two. And of course, education funding. They always manage to come together on education, which is always welcome. And so I guess that'd be it. But man, there's some other looming problems out there.
Yeah. And then as far as I'm sorry, go ahead, Alex.
No, I love Steve's answer that everyone can come together on is, going after those, stinking lobbyists, and how and I added the word stinking, for the record, but no, it is a very good point. I could absolutely see a lot of bipartisan interest in coming after the government affairs community, but that's okay. It would not be the first time. I do think with something like workforce development, and that is such a broad umbrella term that can include so many different areas of public policy and even non-legislative issues, that it certainly has the potential for a broad agreement, but it has to be more than just more dollars into existing programs. I mean, everybody recognizes, or they should, that funding is a component of it. But when you see some of the proposals coming out, on the other side of the aisle, it's really an emphasis on, we need to audit these programs. We need accountability. We need to know, are these dollars being used effectively, efficiently? What are some non-monetary, non-funding ideas to improve workforce development and job training from the K-12 level through to training incumbent workers to make sure they're keeping their skills up. There's ideas for everyone out there, as long as there's not a kind of myopic focus on just your piece of it. So that would certainly be encouraging. I know in so many industries that we work with, it is a threat, and to Jan's point, a looming cliff that is going to have significant implications on our economy over the next 10, 15, 20 years, not to mention on our state budget.
Yeah, and just let me chime in. I feel like I have to say something on the good government reform and the lobbying community. I would point out that in most cases, when you get into campaign finance reform, and for that matter, lobbying reform, I don't think it's the lobbyist community that is the problem. This governor has taken a very strong position about no gifts and that sort of thing. But frankly, the majority of the lobbying community would probably welcome reform in those areas. And I think the state group Pager that represents lobbyists has gone on the record for that. So you really, to affect that, you've got to get the General Assembly to change its opinion on that. And the General Assembly is a winners club. So, they are loath to take the rules that were in place when they got elected. So campaign finance has never really gotten much traction in the state. I personally don't understand why we don't have limits, at least like the federal government does, on political contributions. And then lobbying reform will comply with whatever the law is. But there are concerns, I think, within the General Assembly about how far that goes.
For sure, yeah. So 2020, we saw plenty of partisan battles and bickering, and it seems last week we saw more of it, in Harrisburg. I tend to think that leaders can help and assist and improve the culture. And we do have some new faces in leadership. We lost some voices of reason. We lost some past leaders. So what are your guys' comments on the new leaders in the chamber or in the Senate and the House? Any thoughts there? Or is Senate,
All right.
Corman,
Okay.
and I'm sorry, go ahead, Jan.
No, I guess everybody's hesitant. Well, I mean, I feel like in the House that, Carrie Benninghoff and Brian Cutler are they're reasonable men. They listen to others' opinions. Clearly they, have a slightly conservative bent, but that's all right. It doesn't mean they don't listen to the other side. So, I think that's interesting. I think that, that is going to be a different tone out of the House. Now the Senate has been a lively bunch, and it will be interesting to see kind of, it seems like Senator Ward, who's now the first female, very proud of that, Senate Majority Leader. she's an interesting element, and I look forward to seeing what role she plays in negotiations and as they play out. I mean, I think that it's pretty clear that Senator Corman is uncomfortable with any kind of conflict. It seems like whenever, I don't know if anybody saw swearing in day, but when he had to take the reins from Lieutenant Governor Fetterman, I mean, you could tell that he was not comfortable doing that. And I thought that was I've always heard that about him, but I thought that it was very obvious that day. But he too is a reasonable man, but his caucus has gotten more conservative. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And I don't want to discount the new House Minority Leader, Joanna McClinton, another female. I've got to say, as a woman, for years I wanted to see a woman's voice in those budget meetings, because I always said there's no way there's going to be impasse if women get in there and take control, because they say, let's just get this done. So I do look forward to the new dynamic with these new leaders.
That's what Jan says, backed by like empirical studies, if I'm not mistaken, at least of Congress. So like, who knows? I likewise. It's a lot of new faces, or at least people in new positions. There's some turnover. I mean, there are times when it feels like everyone throws up their hands and doesn't talk to each other. And I think as a reporter, as a Pennsylvanian, that can be frustrating. I also think that everyone is probably really aware of the need, like fix some of these problems. Like Cutler. I mean, Cutler wrote Act 77. It's more or less my understanding. Like he is very that's the vote by mail law. I bring that up because like these people have championed bipartisan bills, and it's really easy to get the focus on like a lot of the tiny blow-ups over partisan fights, things that made national headlines involving all the usual characters. This is still a governor of General Assembly who passed pension reform, medical marijuana, Act 77, and a couple other things, which I'm like actual things I think you can be proud of as a legislator and a governor. It is Wolf's last 2 years, and who can forget the 2022 is coming up, which could also complicate things. Also, it's a redistricting cycle, so they're gonna have to redraw the maps. So there is and then add in the 2020 election. So there's even more political pressure, I think, on this session than any other. But I looking at the new players, they might be able to pull something out of their hat and surprise us with some bipartisanship.
I appreciate that sense of optimism. I think the experience, as Jan mentioned, on swearing in day, if that's on the Senate floor, if that's kind of how the session gets kicked off, on the one hand, maybe you have nowhere to go but up in terms of kind of calming things down. On the other hand, if that portends sort of how the dynamic is going to be throughout the next couple of years, it's going to be difficult. Jan's also right that I think in the I guess the Senate Republican caucus has probably gotten more conservative, but I think the same could be said on the other side for the Senate Democratic caucus. You look at some of their leadership position a little bit down the line. Take the Senate Democratic Policy Committee, for example. That had been chaired by State Senator Lisa Boscola from the Lehigh Valley. Widely viewed as among the more moderate legislators, I think, in the General Assembly, and just a prone for crossing the aisle. She was replaced by State Senator Katie Muth, who I think brings a different style, I think is safe to say, and has been involved in some of the dust-ups on the Senate floor. So, if that is an indication of kind of the direction of the Senate Democratic caucus, again, it's hard to imagine too many kumbaya moments, but we also know there's an ability when there's motivation for it, there's an ability to compartmentalize, and you can have these moments on the floor with that, these viral moments, and then, the next day they're coming together on something. So I don't think it's an all or nothing proposition. probably, it will continue to be a combination of both.
And to follow up with what Alex said, I think it's right on target. Maybe the leadership changes aren't as significant as what has really become a divide in each of the party's caucuses. For the Republicans, it's been going on for some years between, let's say the tax reform, Tea Party type of Republicans versus Chamber of Commerce Republicans. And in more recent years, the Democratic caucus has become splintered in a lot of ways, as you have more progressive candidates getting elected and the more moderate candidates, their numbers are dwindling. But there is a divide within each of the parties, and it shows up in both the House and the Senate here. You had Senator Udicek switch because he just didn't feel like he fit into the Democratic caucus anymore. There's, for our industry and construction, there's a pretty clear divide on a couple of bills that passed last year. One dealing with an issue that pitted the environmental community against building trades, and the other one on E-Verify, which even split the labor camps in some respects. So it's going to be interesting to watch how that all plays out. But the leadership, I don't think represents a real quantum shift. As Alex said, when they have to get together to finish something like a budget, they managed to do that. And I don't think Senator Corman will be a whole lot different as pro tem than he was majority leader. And then the other side, I think Speaker Turzai was a little bit more difficult to deal with for this governor. It might get better under Cutler and Benninghoff, but we'll have to wait and see.
I just want to echo Jan's comment. I'm raising 3 daughters, so I applaud female leadership too. So. And I want to keep John just muted himself, so I want to keep him on the mic here. You mentioned last session, E-Verify, petrochemical tax credits, all that good stuff for our industry. What issues do you think our industry is going to look at this session? Obviously we touched on transportation funding. Are there other topics out there?
Yeah, there are a couple, and some of them are perennials, the procurement issues. I don't see them as necessarily the top of the list. I do think there are maybe some, very specific to the construction industry liability issues that are pending out there. Anti-discrimination provisions in construction contracts is one. I would think that there's a statute of repose bill that would lower the statute of repose year limits for design professionals and contractors. Hard to say if these are going to get traction, and they're pretty much under the radar unless you're in the construction industry. But outside of what we talked about, construction and infrastructure funding, workforce development, I think those are possibilities.
Yep, I agree.
I might add, if I may, John, there's a growing focus nationally and in Pennsylvania on independent contractors, and how employees or independent contractors are classified. There was a bill passed last session, I think it was Act 85, that created a misclassification task force. That group, I believe, just met maybe a week ago for their initial organizing meeting. And I think the idea is to examine the situation in Pennsylvania and put forth some policy recommendations. That is obviously much broader than construction, especially as the economy has evolved and we're hearing more gig economy. That has really exploded in a lot of ways over the last year with Instacart and Uber, Grubhub, But that's something that is definitely on our radar as well. The work of this task force, but also concurrent or subsequent policies that might be pursued.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks. We are getting closer to the 11 o'clock hour here. I did have one question here I wanted to ask and get your thoughts on this. I'll ask our panelists to get out their crystal ball and get ready here when the session's all done and over with. What's going to be the biggest story from the 2021-22 session? What do you think? And the easy answer is the election. I guess you could say, "Oh, we'll have a new governor." Blah blah blah. Well, what? Let's get crazy on this now. What do you think?
I'll just throw out one issue, and I think it's probably redistricting, because that's going to affect the future makeup. And this is the first time in at least 3 decades where the Democrats aren't behind the 8 ball when it comes to how that process plays out. So it could be a big game changing. Not necessarily, hard to predict the future in politics. It seems to be shifting, but I'd say redistricting is an issue.
I mean, I think for employers and certainly for policymakers, just the pandemic response is still very much front and center. We have an effort from the legislature to pass a constitutional amendment to sort of limit the governor's powers related to disaster declarations, or specifically just really prohibiting the governor from perpetually re-declaring disasters and requiring legislative involvement in that process. If that bill passes, it could be on the primary, the May primary ballot. So that would have pretty significant implications on how emergencies are handled in Pennsylvania, and could have implications on this current emergency we're in. But however it plays out, the economy cannot really get on track or get back on track until we figure out the pandemic and really getting things turned around. But I think that will continue to dominate the agenda over the next couple of years.
Wow, you guys took the 2 things that were on my mind. I sort of think that, the way this emergency declaration thing is playing, I mean, the reason the legislators are insisting on it is because the governor isn't seeking the Republican majority's input on his decision making and how to handle the pandemic. And so I can't help but think that all the businesses out there that are so frustrated with the governor's handling of it, that there's going to be, I think, some money spent to ensure that the legislators get this input and that this constitutional amendment passes. And then I'm just thinking, okay, now the governor's going to be forced to either deal with the Republican majorities and how to handle the pandemic response, or we just are treading water. I mean, I think it's, with the lame duck governor, it's going to be so interesting. And then the other part of it is you have the Biden administration, and he's looking to the president to really kind of help Pennsylvania out. And I don't know. I hope we're not spending the next 2 years just spinning our wheels. I fear that would be the case, because that just seems to be the way it goes in Pennsylvania, unfortunately. But hopefully things will be. Hopefully we'll see some progress. I mean, that's what we always hope for. But that's what my crystal ball is, very cloudy. Let me just say that.
Yeah, mine is as well. I'll kind of grab what Jen said near the end with Biden. If the Biden administration does get a significant stimulus passed, obviously that is all above my pay grade, above what I cover. That is going to put a huge amount of money into the General Assembly. General Assembly may have to spend it. And as we saw, in January, what is a better incentive to get a bunch of people at the table than, hey, we have to spend this federal money, and do we want to be the schmucks who have egg on their face because we didn't spend federal money that literally is just a gift to us? That would probably, I don't know, add a little incentive to get everything moving. I mean, that's on top of all the other stuff we talked about. But yeah, I guess that'd be the one thing I'm thinking. I would, if I had to give a prediction, it would be probably lots of spinning wheels with small bits of sunny bipartisanship that everyone's points to when they need to run for re-election in new districts.
Absolutely. Good stuff here. I see we got a question in the chat here. I'm bad at checking the chats here, so sorry about that. General Motors announced 2 days ago they will sell only electric vehicles by 2035. Okay, it's another transportation question. It's not really a question, it's just a comment here, so people could read that. Good stuff here. But yeah,
Yeah, the PennDOT secretary was at the Senator Langerholtz's hearing last week. That's what she rattled off, all the different companies, and it definitely is moving to electric vehicles. I don't know how you afford them, but because I've looked at them, but it'll be interesting to see what happens.
yeah, that's for sure. A lot of changes. But yeah, I thought it was great. I thought it was awesome. I don't know if panelists have any closing comments you'd like to part on, but I really enjoyed the discussion. Hope everyone else did. I put on the screen there the contact information for our panel today, so feel free to reach out to them. On behalf of the KCA, I'd like to thank each of them for joining us today, and a special thanks to Senator Wayne Langerholt, who's the newest employee of Burns White, a KCA member. Thanks to Matt Jameson for getting his friend Wayne to join us today. Really enjoyed his comments. And like I mentioned today, construction workers are working. We worked during the pandemic. We worked during blizzards. So we're gonna release this on a podcast, and it should be within the next couple hours. So hopefully, as they're driving away from the job site, they'll be able to listen to our panelists talk today. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us, and there's the contact info. Please enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe, and we'll be in touch. See ya.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, guys.